So now let's talk about where do I start? All right. So for all students, whether they're beginning or whether they're advanced, all students are going to start in step number 1 of the scope and sequence. This is the Spell to Write and Read book, and in the very front of the book, inside cover, you have the scope and sequence, and this is how all of the steps laid out. And so all students, doesn't matter which level you are, all students, the teacher will work through the first 11 steps with those students. And meaning you're in this book for those first 11 steps. Okay, we don't even get to the WISE guide until we're ready to start step 12, which is the spelling list. So all students are going to work on those 11 steps. And some of that, like step 1 is teacher preparation. Okay, obviously at the beginning of the year, you want to prep. You're going to do your homework and you're going to get ready. So it's those kinds of things. But presented in those steps are 2 of the reference pages. And those are key, those are foundational to everything you're going to work on all year. And so every single year, you're going to start back at step 1. And you're going to cover that information again. Every time the student comes back to it, they'll have a deeper understanding. And there are some ways that are mentioned in the book on how to adapt that at the higher levels. If you've already done those pages, the consonant vowel page, for example, you can adapt that with different words so that it's not the same words every year. Now, step 11, when you're working through those steps, step 11 is determining placement in the WISE list. And like I said, in 2 weeks, I will be helping you with that. We'll be talking about step 11, actually steps 4 and 11, the diagnostic test and determining placement. In 2 weeks, I'll talk about that. So I'm going to help you right now, okay? If you're working with a beginner, I'm going to help you do step 11 right now. First of all, you don't even do step 4. You do not give the diagnostic test to kindergartners. So here you go. Here's placement for a kindergartner, first grader. Section A in the WISE list. The very beginning. You're going to start with the very first spelling list. There you go. There's placement. All right. Now, what about for a second grader or above? Well, then you have to give the diagnostic test, and you will use some other criteria depending on whether you've used the program before. There's a whole bunch of questions we would want to go through. And you use that diagnostic test information to determine where in the spelling list you're going to start. Okay, so that is why it's really helpful if you know ahead of time whether you're, it's helpful when you're doing your prep to know where your student is going to start. Okay, because that tells you what you need to work on in your master teacher's log as you're getting ready to teach for the year. One of the things, it's very important that you understand when you're coming and you're doing your prep and you're looking at this book, it's very helpful to understand, do I have a beginner or do I have an advanced student? And I'll tell you why. One of the misconceptions that we have, very common, is people think they have to read this whole book in order to teach the program. And that's not the case. You want to really get your head wrapped around the first 12 steps. Okay, you want to pretty much know about that much of the book. Now, you don't have to know it all. In fact, there's some information there that's referenced that you'll come back to later. And that's why knowing what level you're teaching, beginning or advanced, is so helpful. So let's say, for example, that you're teaching a kindergartner. And this is your first year, and you're just getting started with the program. Okay, I'm teaching kindergarten. That means this is a beginner. Now, as I'm going through this first part of the book, that looks like a lot, but it's not, because you're going to do it with your own learning log, and you're going to follow the instructions in here. As you are reading, I'm teaching beginner. As you're reading, every time Wanda Sinceri is the author of our program, every time she starts talking about advanced students, skip it. You don't have to read that part. That's not for you. You need to focus on the instructions for just the beginner. Okay? So that's why it's so helpful for you to understand what's the level that I'm teaching. Now, let's say you're teaching an advanced student. Okay? Then you need to read both. But there's advanced information in here. I said sometimes you're going to come back and look at it later. So, for example, one of the topics that we teach on the consonant vowel page is the C and the G rules. Well, there's all kinds of really cool information that I could tell my student, I could teach my student about those rules that they really don't need to know when I'm first getting started. But later, questions are going to come up about those rules, and I'm going to say, let me go back to my book and I'm going to find the answer for you. Well, that's the advanced information. So it's not something I have to teach from the very beginning, but it's reference material. So later when questions come up, I have the answers. Okay, so I can skip that when I'm doing my first reading. I don't have to read that advanced stuff. Okay, so it's helpful to understand what level you're teaching when you're reading, because if you're teaching a kindergartner, I will tell you there's stuff in here you just don't even need to worry about. Okay, now the rest of the book, I said that first part, the first 12 steps, that's what you read, because that's foundation. That's like everything builds on that. Then the rest of it, all the rest of this book, when you're working through the WISE Guide, you're teaching the spelling rules, and the WISE Guide tells you need to go teach a concept, that's when you go to that part of the book. Okay, and I need to teach silent filese. Okay, go look up the silent filese section and read that. And again, only pay attention to the parts that pertain to your section. Again, beginner, if you're teaching beginning students, skip anything that's advanced. If you're teaching advanced, you must read the beginner, because that contains information that you're going to need for teaching, but you also have to focus on the advanced material unless it's the advanced, and then you can ignore it until later.